Welcome to a new episode of Mind Your Mind podcast. I am Roxana Parra Sepulveda, your host, and today I am so thrilled to have with me Dr. Jill R.Baron, who is an integrative and functional medicine physician and author of the best-selling book, Don't Mess with Stress, a simple guide to managing stress, optimizing health, and making the world a better place. This book gives us tools and techniques to strengthen our minds, bodies, and immune system during this time that is so particularly stressful and demanding. Jill, welcome.
Thank you so much, Roxana, for having me on this show.
I'm really happy because I have your book and have been reading it, and I was noticing that I have so many marks on it. So found it so helpful and useful with so many tips that I will definitely use personally. And so definitely wanting to recommend the book as well, and you can find it on Amazon, right?
Yes.
First question, what was the inspiration for your book? I was wondering how all of this came about.
Yes, well, to be honest, and as I write in the first chapter, I've dealt with anxiety and stress for most of my life. And I don't know if it's partly genetic, uh, but and also desire to always do the right thing and people please and be liked and all of that. And so at a young age, I learned about transcendental meditation. I think I was just turned 17, and although I thought it was 16, but I think it was 17, and I had seen an advertisement in the local paper. It said something like decrease stress and, learn TM, and here's a free lecture. And so I went to the public library for the lecture, and I said, wow. And I found out that one of my teachers in high school was a meditator,
Mm-hmm.
and another kid that I knew in high school, classmate, had also been doing it. And I said, I want to learn. And so I learned how to do transcendental meditation, TM.
I see.
Uh, and yes, and then I really, it's interesting. I think that I was not mature enough to do it because I was just doing it from time to time. And then I stopped doing it in college. And it wasn't until I was a resident through my residency, my last year of residency in family practice, that I had a very strange serendipitous episode happen to me.
Uh-huh.
I was my last month of learning how to be a doctor in residency, and I was making a home visit, learning how to be a doctor to go to someone's home. And I remember my patient, she was an 86-year-old, very strong woman, and I had what's called my attending physician coming with me to oversee and instruct me on how to do this. And so we did the visit, and we were
Mm-hmm.
going back to the hospital where I was doing my training. And all of a sudden, he hits his brakes and says, there's my patient on the road. And we
Uh-huh.
see a woman whose car had been stopped. And we get out and we said, what's going on? It was on the cusp of cell phones. And she said, my car stopped, I guess ran out of gas or something. And ironically, she was on the way to the hospital to see a different doctor because her doctor, who was with me, was on his way to teaching me how to be a doctor on a
Uh-huh.
home visit. And so on the back of her car was a bumper sticker. And I said, oh, it said transcendental meditation. I said, oh, I used to do that. Anyway, we took her in the car, we brought her to the hospital, and she said to me, you know, um, I must check you to see if you're doing TM correctly.
Okay.
I said,
That's
I
a
said,
challenge.
I said to her, I haven't meditated in years. She said, oh, no. You must meditate, and you must meditate twice a day. And I said, okay, just check me. And she
Uh-huh.
checked me, and I knew that I had a month left of residency, and I had an on-call room so I could do my TM there. And I figured I'll do an experiment. I'll
Uh,
meditate.
okay.
And that's how I got started doing TM again. And so in answer to your question, why did I write this book? I wrote this book because in addition to learning TM, I have been a seeker my whole life and very mind body oriented. And I studied with Deepak Chopra. I went to India.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of things on my way to helping myself. I've had therapy. I'm doing all these things. So doing done a lot of personal growth things to
Uh-huh.
try and help myself
Mm.
manage stress and anxiety and all that. And so I wanted to help people because, to educate them to what I've learned and then what I thought would be a really good structure in terms of to how to help people. And ironically, my mother, who's turning 97 tomorrow,
Uh-huh.
uh, thank God, was the one who coined the title. I remember we were sitting around like 20 years ago.
Oh,
You helped me. I
lovely.
said, I was thinking of a title. And she said, how about Don't Mess with Stress? And I said, that's a great title. And then I figured out that the letters of the title, you know,
Mm-hmm.
don't is
The
D, M is S, meditate, W. So diet, it said for diet, meditate, walk, and sleep. And that is really a framework for building resilience and health.
Fantastic. And we will get a little bit more in depth into that as well, because I was very curious about this very last thing that you have said, the DMWS. No, it's not only about don't mess with the stress, but actually is part of the structure that you have created to help people to navigate this journey that actually, interestingly enough, started with a personal journey for you, no?
Yes,
And that's very much the nature of so many good journeys as well. No, it's a personal process, I
yes,
think, and a personal relationship with the stress, and as you were saying, no, pleasing people, responding to others' expectations. For many of us that are in the helping professions, be already in those helping positions and supporting others from very young age as well, maybe within our families and so on. So there is so much there that has to do with that personal journey.
yes,
So in that process of self-exploration and self-understanding, I'm assuming, and what I understood as well from your book, you got to some kind of understanding of what resilience is, no? And
yes,
so I was curious to know how do you define resilience, and what do you look at when you look at resilience?
yes. So I also want to say that all of this work for myself and for others, it's a process. I still get stressed. I may be a little more circumspect and less reactive because
Uh-huh.
I do try and follow what I preach, but I'm not perfect. Last night, I have to confess, I really shouldn't confess this. I had two helpings of ice cream because
Yeah.
it's celebrating my mother's birthday, this weekend. But in getting back to your question, so building resilience is really the ability to withstand the stressors and come back easily when you're being pushed off center. I talk about in my book about the idea of a clown. When I was a kid, they had these plastic clowns that were weighted on the bottom, and you could hit
Uh-huh.
the clown, right? And the clown, this kind of like almost like a balloon, would kind of come back up very quickly. And I
Uh-huh.
think about resilience in that way is that when we're pushed off our center, when the
Mm.
clown is, if we hit the clown, we
Mm.
don't come back that fast if we don't have much resilience. We may get sick. It may take us a while for our bodies to recover.
Absolutely. Mm.
And so when I created this structure, which is very common, I think other people probably have recommended similar things, but putting it together in this way, I felt that by having a healthy diet, by having some sort of meditative or yogic practice or qigong or tai chi, a
Mm.
daily practice, and then movement, and then adequate sleep, that this helps to build resilience
Uh-huh.
so that when you're pushed off your center, you're it's easier to come back to your center.
Mm.
I mean, right now I'm dealing with my parents who are older. They're,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had their share of things, and it's hard. I'm actually here with them, visiting them. It's not easy dealing with what that they will die, which is hard to even say.
Of
And
course.
that's stressful. And
Yes.
my father yesterday, who's very independent and is driving, and
Mm-hmm.
although he has hearing loss, and but as a man who survived two plane crashes in the Navy 6 weeks apart, it's a pretty amazing guy. And he's
Wow.
withstood a lot of things. His father died when he was 10, and he became a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, and just an amazing human being. That's resilience in many ways. He's had heart disease, he's had metastatic prostate cancer at 87, and he's still here at 94 and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and
How
functional.
wonderful. How
Yeah,
wonderful.
I got a little off track, but that's resilience.
Yeah,
Resilience,
no, and yeah, and what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that very real aspect of life. Know that life threw at us all kind of challenges. Either it is with our own health, with loss of loved ones. There is a combination of situations in different periods of life. We need different things. We do have different challenges. I was meeting with friends last night, and we were laughing out loud, sharing all the variety of challenges that premenopause is bringing to us.
yes,
And we were taking it with lots of humor, but actually, it's a huge change in particularly in women body. At emotional level, our physical level, in so many ways. So what I'm thinking of when were telling me about this and the story of your dad as well, is that those challenges, no, and how the importance of what you're saying, that I want to absolutely highlight the fact that this is an ongoing process, that
yes,
the maintenance is, I see it as a maintenance, no, of resilience, something that needs to be maintained during time, and that knowing as well that that need of maintenance will be completely different in different moments of life.
well said, well said. I mean, I think there might be variations on the don't mess with stress theme, but for example, I confided in you. I found out that an ex-boyfriend of mine and still very close friend, I found out late last night that he dropped dead. And I
Mm,
spoke to him over the
mm,
weekend, and I
mm,
was supposed to
mm.
see him when he was coming into town. We're dear friends. And that was a real shock. So I didn't sleep very much last night. And that,
Yes.
if, and I thought about canceling. I said, God, I probably look like hell, excuse my French.
No.
But I got up and I meditated,
Uh-huh.
I'm here.
Mm.
And, that was a real shock to my system.
Absolutely, and I'm extremely appreciative that you decided to go ahead with our recording session today, because
Yes,
I always think about the work of the podcast as well in a way that needs to fit with my guests' needs as well, no? And but as you say, we decide, and we use as well so many tools and actions that we can make to help us to carry on with life, because and I was really, really sorry to hear about your loss. So such a shock, no? That is
yes,
a shock for the system at so many levels, but also how our commitments and the demands of life also sometimes require us to be present,
yes,
and to carry on being there. And makes me think as well about so many frontline workers that are facing as well the death, for example, of their patients. Especially during the period of the pandemic, there was so many people that
yes,
was dying, and I'm thinking in loss in general. And I don't want to minimize your experience, but thinking as well of how much loss and how much grief is in the life of a frontline worker, and
yes,
not only by witnessing the suffering of their clients, but also by actually losing people, or for those that are humanitarian workers as well, are so much in touch with death. And it's interesting that our conversation is touching on this element, because for me, the aspect of life and death obviously are so close, but at the same time, it tells us about that very fragile sort of aspect of life. We're here today, tomorrow we don't know,
I
right?
know. Yes, it's quite like you said, it was a shock to me. But again, all these wars. It's so sad. We really shouldn't have any war. People are people. I was thinking it's just an outside envelope that's different that distinguishes us. I mean, it's really, if you think about it, it's just people are people, and it's so unnecessary for all this barbarism and death and wars, and we
Hmm.
just want the same things, I think. We just, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why as well, what also brought my attention very strongly when I was introduced to you and to your book was the idea that part of the idea of the book is to make the world a better place.
yes,
No?
yes, yes, because my thesis, one of the major thesis to write this book actually is because I feel that when people feel better about themselves, mind and body,
Uh-huh.
if you will, spirit, that they're usually apt to be nicer to the another person. It's interesting.
Yes.
I live in New
Mm.
York City, and I take the subway, and I see people of all different sorts, and
Uh-huh.
whether it's a person of a different color of my skin or the same color of my skin or whatever, if someone's wearing like a nice dress or a nice suit, or I will say to that person,
Uh-huh.
nice suit or nice dress. And the person like just gets so is startled in a very positive way, and will say, oh, thank you. And they stand up straighter. They seem to,
Yes.
they feel better. And then maybe they'll pass it on because they're walking out of that subway car feeling better. And they may be nicer to the next person they see. They might smile at someone instead of scowl. In that
Exactly.
way, it's
Yes.
paying it forward. And I get a lot of pleasure about thinking about that kind of stuff. Being nice
Yeah,
to other people in a sincere way. I mean, if I didn't like the dress, I
absolutely.
probably wouldn't say anything. But,
Absolutely.
you
You
know,
don't have to force it, but it's about connecting as well with that kindness within yourself to be
yes,
able to be in that place, and then that gets projected either verbally
yes.
or just with your way of relating to someone, no?
And yes, I think the reverse is possible too. I mean, I think that
Mm.
if you intentionally try and be nice to someone else, it makes you feel good. When you see the
Yes.
smile on that person's face, or the face light up, I mean, that makes, I wasn't thinking about that, but it makes me feel good, or the person feel good. You make someone
Yes.
else's life better.
Absolutely. And that also is part of the motivations that so many people that work in caring professions and health professions that and in the charity sector as well that are there because it makes them feel good to give something to someone, to be there for someone. And I think that's is amazing, and I really, really appreciate it. And I actually recognize it in myself as well.
Hmm.
And in a way, that is part of what motivates me to think about the self-care of the carer. No, because I think it's almost as it's like a cycle, it's a round cycle, in which you give only if you are nurtured yourself in order to carry on giving. I mean, you could give, but that becomes at some point detrimental. If it may start being quite satisfying, but then it gets to a point where it becomes detrimental to the person that is constantly giving, and then kind of lose the purpose, no? Lose. And for people as well, I have seen so much the impact of their work, and the witnessing of the pain of others as well. So it's something about that need of care of the carer that is also part of this dialogue, I think, that we are having
Yes,
today, no?
yes.
Mm. And you mentioned the structure, and I was wondering as well if we could tell a little bit more to everybody about these different points of the structure, the DMWS, and what do you see as the starting point?
That's a great question. In my book, I think I say that you could pick which one you want to start with, D, then
Okay.
W, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But since it's in order of my book, um, I start with diet, and there's some very basic points. I think that there's not one way, not one diet for everybody. We have
Mm.
to take into consideration culture, history, that kind of thing. Although I think that we can make things healthier. And
Yes.
and then, I mean, if you want to think of an overall kind of structure, I mean, in terms of a diet, the
Mm.
Mediterranean diet we hear about, kind of an anti-inflammatory diet
Yes.
with olive oil and nuts and
Mm-hmm.
seeds and,
Mm-hmm.
less animal flesh, but, fish,
Uh-huh.
um, and fruits and some healthy grains are all helpful. But then again, if you put in that food in an angry body or a frightened body or an unhealthy body, or if you're eating while you're, you know, angry, as I mentioned, that food won't be digested very well,
I see. Yes.
And so,
Yes.
even and so eating, and this is I still have in this don't mess with stress structure, I still have things I'm working on, not to listen to my, I mean, read the paper, or I actually stopped getting the paper in paper actually recently because I couldn't look at the gore on the front page of the New York Times. I get it digitally, except for the weekends now.
Uh-huh.
But things, so in other words, but being more mindful. I mean, there are kind of some global things with all of this: the diet, meditate, walk, and sleep. Sleep. It's also about mindful, being present, and
Yes.
as you mentioned, it's an ongoing process. So in terms of the diet, some important things, that's what I just mentioned, kind of not to have really a lot of processed food if possible.
Mm.
And one of
Mm.
the things I talk about also is that, see how you feel. If you eat a lot of sugar,
Yes.
sugar, I mean, I had some last night, I mean, I'm not having it every day.
Yes.
And I didn't have huge amounts. They were
Mm-hmm.
small
Mm-hmm.
scoops when I had seconds.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, medium scoops. But thinking about, if you eat too much sugar, sugar binds to proteins and fats, and you get what's called AGES products, AGES,
Mm-hmm.
advanced glycation end products. So the sugar binds to proteins, I think some fats, and it can muck up the combination of the sugar and these proteins. They're inflammatory in themselves, and they
I
go into
see.
the brain, and they can muck up your brain and thinking, and it causes inflammation. And
Uh-huh.
so too much sugar, when I've had sugar, like on an empty stomach, I can feel jittery. I can feel very anxious. And I know the feeling, and people can do an experiment when they eat sugar, or a lot of sugar. They just may not feel, they may feel their thinking is foggy. So I recommend, if you're going to eat some sugar, have it after a meal,
Mm.
because when you eat sugar, let's say a candy bar on an empty stomach, let's say, the insulin, because it's just really pure sugar,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you basically, it's in your mouth, and then it goes right to your stomach, and then very quickly into the intestine, and the insulin is released very quickly to bind with the sugar. And so it's hard on the pancreas when you have like a big load of sugar on
I
an empty
see.
stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the pancreas gets stressed. So if you were to have the same load of sugar after a meal, there's other food in there, so that the insulin is released in more of a pulsatile release. You're still getting the same load of sugar, which is not good, but it
Yes.
may not go to your brain that fast. So the impact, I mean, you're still getting the same load, but the impact on the pancreas is not as severe. But again, net, you're still getting the same load of sugar, which is not good for your body, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
really, to sum up, eating, there are different theories, but 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, as I mentioned, nuts, seeds, if vegetables, fresh fruits, ideally wild fish. Yes.
Yes, and I was also thinking about fruit when you were talking about sugar and on an empty stomach, no? And also, I guess it's about choice and realizing that we have so many options, and that sometimes simple fruit, a simple apple, or a banana will also have sugar in it, but it will probably have a slightly different impact, I wonder, within our system, compared to a sugar bar, no? And
Right. And the reason for
what's
that,
your
yes, the reason for that is because there's fiber in an apple,
uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
I guess there's some fiber in banana. But ideally, what I tell my patients is
Mm-hmm.
ideally if you can have like some nuts, if you can have nuts and the apple or some apple butter and on the banana or apple butter on, I mean, I'm sorry, I meant almond butter or peanut butter.
Uh-huh.
Um, a healthy organic type would be best, on an
Yes.
apple or an organic fruit. Again,
Yes.
with fruit, you have to be careful about pesticides. Like
Yes.
berries
Uh-huh.
are especially strawberries and blueberries and berries are highly pesticided. So I think if you can be mindful of those kinds of things, if you had a choice, it's interesting. We talk about liquid sugar, like
Uh-huh.
soda and
Okay.
juice, even orange juice,
Yes.
even though I love orange juice, fresh squeezed.
Yes. Mm.
A little bit is okay. But, I think like an 8-ounce glass of apple juice and an 8-ounce glass of Coke or cola
Uh-huh.
has the same amount of sugar.
I
I think it's
see.
55 grams or 10 ounce. Yes. So, yeah, so that's similarly metabolized, those two things. So it's
Mm,
better
mm.
if you think about having the actual fruit, like if you were thinking about an apple, better to have the apple with the skin then there's apple sauce or apple butter, and then there's apple juice. So it's better to probably have the apple. You
Uh-huh.
can have a little
Uh-huh.
bit of apple juice, maybe, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
not so much. I wouldn't have an 8-ounce glass of apple juice. That's a big shock to the system.
I see. And these are little nuggets of knowledge that are so useful because one will not think about these things. And if you don't know them, you just go for what you're used to intake or what you know, right? There's
Right,
so little information about this. And that's what I love as well about functional medicine that has the understanding of these kind of aspects of how our diet will impact and how do we can manage the inflammation that is produced by stress within
right.
our body. No?
That's right.
There is so much that comes to my mind with regards to diet, but I think also is about the combination. No, you mentioned the ice cream that you had last night, and right after you said, well, but I did exercise today. No, and that made me think about that very combination, because none of these goes alone, right? And that movement is also an important part of maintaining that resilience that we were talking about earlier.
Right, right.
How
Yeah,
do you
yes,
introduce movement in the structure?
yes, yes. And another confession. I mean, I think after I had the ice cream, I felt a little guilty, which isn't great, and my family member said, "Oh, just enjoy it." But I enjoyed
Yes,
it was delicious. So,
good.
um,
I'm
and
glad.
also, yes, with diet, if you think about it, there's a term called orthorexia.
Okay.
Orthorexia,
Mm-hmm.
and orthorexia is really an obsessive uh, kind of attitude towards eating, where you're looking at everything you put in your mouth in a very kind of intense, almost obsessive way, where it can
Okay.
get out of hand.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I'm guilty of having, I don't want to say I have orthorexia, but, I mean, I just think that, it can get out of hand. And if we think
Mm-hmm.
about loosening up a little bit, and I have to talk to myself about that as well, uh, is that if you think about eating well 80 to 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time, you don't eat as well, but maybe if you feel good about it while you're eating it and you're savoring it while you're eating it, then it's okay. It's
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes,
yeah,
because we don't want to. One of the things that I have said more than once, people have heard it in previous episode, is that we should not, we shall not shoot ourselves into well-being. No, that creates so much guilt. And as we always say, we move forward, sometimes a little bit backwards, then we carry on forward, and so on. Is
right,
that
right,
part of this constant movement in which we are consistently in life? Because in the end, is every day is different, and is the same with diet, for example. I totally think about that, and I noticed that when I started to change my own diet, I started to look more what was the content of the food that I was eating, and I was shocked. about some of the things, like, oh, really? I mean, the amount of sugar or the amount of, I decided to stop eating gluten. So gluten everywhere. And so that very change, it helped me with the symptoms that I had at the time. And consistently helped me to maintain the symptoms that I had at bay. And just by making very small adjustments, but being consistent about it. And if I have a little bit of gluten every now and again, I just enjoy it, but because I know that will not trigger my symptoms and so on. But it's something about that as well, no, working in this process without trying to, not punishing ourselves or being guilty about, with guilt about where we are in the process, no?
Yes, yes. Getting back to your question about movement.
Mm.
So there's, I think, there's recent research that movement and physical activity is probably the best thing you could do for your brain. And
Uh-huh.
it's really the best thing you could do for your whole body. I mean, I know that when I exercise, I may not always enjoy it while I'm doing it. It depends what the exercise is, but I feel so much better after. And this year, I actually hired a trainer. I've done it over the years, but I decided that I need to have someone twice a week, just for a half hour each time,
Uh-huh.
to because who's trained in helping me preserve my bones, flexibility, strength, so that when I can age better, and it's a priority. So
Yes.
for people, let's say, who may say that they don't have the money, which I can understand, there are many ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many videos and things like that. But there are also ways that people have habits, let's say, that they're spending on like a latte every day. They can take that money and and save it for a week, and then put it towards maybe a trainer or some kind of fitness like that. And it's a real kind of imperative for me now as I
Yes.
age. I don't want to break any bones, like I said, and I want to know. And also, it will be someone who will be there to say, you can do it, you can do it, like the next set, let's say, of repetitions, because I
Yes.
may not do it myself, you
Uh-huh.
know? So, and so that is helpful for me, having a coach. We have coaches for everything. We have coaches, we have teachers, right? If you want to learn a
Yes.
sport or you want to learn an instrument or whatever it is, we have coaches and they know better than I do.
Uh-huh.
So, and how to do that best for me. So, in terms of movement, though, there's so much benefit in terms of the brain. It decreases inflammation. It also increases what's called B, as in boy, D, and F, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is fertilizer for the brain.
Uh-huh.
And as it's been referred to, which helps to decrease inflammation and helps potentially to decrease dementia. And also, movement is so good for depression and mood,
Mm.
and it increases endorphins, and it's also good for blood flow. It's good for your muscles, and if you add
Yes.
flexibility and you add strength training, the recommendations right now from the American Heart Association uh, are to do moderate intense exercise 150 minutes per week, and that can be broken up.
Uh-huh.
You can do increments of 10 minutes. I probably wouldn't recommend doing all 150 minutes in
At
at once,
once.
but I
Yeah.
would break it up. And moderate intense exercise means the ability you could just about have a conversation with someone. And then strength training twice a week. So lifting weights, resistance training so that you can build
For your
bones, it helps with
muscles as well,
balance.
right? Uh-huh.
Right. It's very important to avoid what's called, as we age, sarcopenia, which
Uh-huh.
is loss of muscle mass. Because once you start doing that, you really can affect your whole physiognomy, if you will, the structure of your body and
Uh-huh.
physiology.
Yes.
And you can be at risk for falls, and it's just not good. Your body is using up, it's using the muscle for its energy, which is not good. So it's very important that we want to prevent that
I
from
see.
happening.
And how do
Yeah.
we prevent that?
We prevent it by having a good diet and
Uh-huh.
by exercising, by strength
Okay.
training and
Uh-huh.
building resilience in that way.
I see. I
Yeah,
see.
very
Not
important.
that,
That way you also prevent falls and so you don't break bones and
yeah,
yeah.
and not that difficult to do. So you, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that by having some kind of movement during a period of time every week, plus a relatively good diet, we can really strengthen our body, our muscles, our bones, and ensure that we have a better sort of later life in a way. No, that when
Yes,
we
and
get older, we maintain that sense of the strength within our body
that's
when
right.
we're
My
older
mother, who
age.
is 97,
Uh-huh.
she lives in a house where she has to walk up steps every day.
I see.
So,
Uh-huh.
and they walk, and she walks up two flights. They're not that big, but she walks up every day. And so does my dad, and housekeeping and those kinds of things
Mm-hmm.
are can difference. There was a study, I think, I don't know if you know about the study, though. They were looking at housekeepers, and they
Okay.
divided
Yeah,
the housekeepers into two groups,
I see.
and
Uh-huh.
and they told one group, I may not be citing everything perfectly, but the gist was they told one group to go about their, they were cleaning, I think, in their activities, and they didn't tell them anything about what to think about. They
Uh-huh.
told the other group to think about that they were really helping their bodies. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second group had beneficial markers for
Mm.
their physiology in terms of their muscle strength, I believe, and aerobic capacities. So it's really interesting that maybe also mindset helps
Can,
in terms of
yes.
that, in terms of thinking that when they're doing housework, they're building their
Absolutely.
bodies.
Absolutely. And so what the W is standing for in the
Well,
structure?
actually, W is the walk, and
I
M is actually
see.
meditate. So the way so M is actually meditate. W
Meditation.
is walk, stands for walk, move, exercise, or dance. And you could dance. Dance is an exercise equivalent,
I
right?
love dancing,
Exercise
and it's
equivalent.
such a, yeah, it's fun,
Yes,
and you
it's
don't even
fun.
realize how much exercise you're doing.
And
Yes.
you can do it with a partner, which is great. You can walk with
Yes.
someone so you get social connection, which is also, we know, very important
Yes.
for longevity and brain health and emotional health. But the M is the meditate.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I could have gone either way, M, but I had to figure out what to
Yes.
do with the W. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so M is meditate. And I mentioned I have a pretty daily practice of doing my TM. I've tried, and I talk about in the book, many different types. There's not one way. There's
Different.
mindfulness,
Uh-huh.
there's art of living, breathing, there's Tai Chi, there's Qigong, which I've done. I haven't done it much recently. And but I believe that having these practices is a way of anchoring your your brain and your mind and helps you get centered and decrease stress. We have a lot of evidence about meditation that it can help decrease blood pressure. Uh, it helps creativity. Now,
Mm.
again, there are times when I will get upset, but it may be a bit more thoughtful in
Uh-huh.
terms of my getting upset and reactive.
Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Not always perfect, but I also may come back to center quicker. So
Absolutely.
it's a process, as you mentioned.
Mm,
It's not
mm, mm.
perfect,
Yes.
but I do feel that as I've been doing this, and I do miss my
Mm.
meditations, I missed it last night.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I can feel when I miss. It's interesting.
Yes,
I
you're
can feel it in my physiology, in my head, and then it
yes.
will pass.
Uh-huh.
But I did it this morning. It was very important. I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to do a little yoga, just a few. I do about 10 minutes of stretching in the morning, and I occasionally miss that. But that helps my flexibility. And I believe that flexibility also carries over into my brain flexibility, maybe
Mm,
being a little more
mm,
flexible in
mm,
how
mm,
I
mm.
think. So you see how it's all tied in. It's all
Everything.
tied in,
Mm.
and in Turkey and to our listeners, I don't want them to feel stressed out, no pun intended, about having to do all of these things at once: diet, meditate, walk, and sleep. And as you mentioned, it's about baby steps,
Yes,
baby
definitely.
steps to health. And So let's say with the diet, maybe if you're eating a lot of processed foods, or you have jobs where you can't get
Uh-huh.
healthy food.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just add an extra vegetable to what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
A week. Maybe steam a vegetable, maybe put some olive oil on it, right? Don't deep fry it, but maybe add something. And every day, maybe add another vegetable or another fruit or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Some fruits are high in sugar, like pineapple and that
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. If you have diabetes, whatever, you may not want to have those too much. But think about baby steps with movement. If you haven't, again, you want to make sure you don't have any heart disease, so you might want to go see your doctor. And maybe if you're over 50 or have risk factors, cardiac risk factors, family history, or high cholesterol, or smoking, obesity, you don't want to go out and run a marathon. You want to get checked out. But
Absolutely.
even that, you may want to just start with walking
Yes.
half a block and
Yes.
slowly increasing how
Yes.
far you walk. You hear about all these people who never moved, and then they're running marathons.
Mm,
They
mm.
didn't start out running a marathon. I'm not saying we have to marathon. I run a marathon. I've never run a marathon. I probably never will. But I try. I know that exercise is important, and it isn't. We've heard this concept. I'm sure you've heard this concept in terms of personal growth. When you have a big enough why, WHY,
Uh-huh.
that can make you do things that you don't want to do. Now, I may not feel like going to the gym, but I know that I need to do it
Uh-huh.
because it's going to be better for my brain, better for
Mm-hmm.
my health, all these things. I have family history of certain diseases, heart disease,
Mm-hmm.
dementia. I don't want to, I want to have a long life. So that little thinking gives me the impetus to say, go to the gym. I was
Uh-huh.
tired yesterday,
Yes.
but I made myself, I mean, you have to listen to your body too, but I made myself go to the gym, get on the elliptical.
Yes, and definitely that's the balance. No, we need to hear our bodies, but also we need to implement these routines that also will help us to maintain our body, our mind, our spirituality in the best possible place, because we are also thinking about people that have very demanding jobs that I'm
Yes.
sure the majority of them, if we ask them, I'm imagining them. I remember I was in a conference, doing a conference very recently with a group of workers of a charity organization, and I asked, how many of you have described your day as very busy during the last week? Everybody raised their hands, and that's the reality of the life that many of the people that we are thinking of today as well is having, and in general in society. But it's this intensity, this constant doing, achieving, and being under stress at some level. So what I'm hearing from what you're saying, that any movement can be a good
Like
movement,
I'm going to get
right?
up right now. We've
Yes.
been sitting for about almost 50 minutes, right? They say, and they
Yes.
also, so this is another tip.
Yes.
They say, about every 55 minutes or so
I
to get
see.
actually, if you can march around and do like 75 steps.
Oh, really? I shall do it with you.
Yeah. So I
As
just
a
got up and
therapist as well, I
I'm
I
just
do.
moving a little bit,
Mm.
and it increases the blood flow. And because we've been sitting for a while. And so one tip you could do is every 50 to 55 minutes, set a timer and just get up and walk around the room. If you can get 75 steps, that's a really good thing. I don't know how many we did, um, but I'm sitting here, we're talking to each other, and we're moving. We're
Yeah.
moving, and it's going to increase blood flow, increase oxygen. You can move your arms while you're doing it. You put on some music while you're doing it. You can dance for 5 minutes.
That's
Uh,
good.
your coworkers might find you a little crazy if you just start dancing, but you can all
Yes.
get them to do it too.
Yes. So all of these little tips, no, for everybody to implement very quickly in their day to day. The last one that we need to think about is sleep. And I know
Yes.
that's massive. But if you were to think about one central aspect of the sleeping, what that will be?
Yeah. And this is very hard for me. So I didn't sleep very
Mm,
well last night because I found out late last night that my dear friend suddenly died. That was very disruptive, right? So,
mm,
but in general, what the recommendations are, and this is hard for most of us if we're living and we have cell phones and we have screens, they say ideally you should stop looking at a screen an hour before. Now, I had another
uh-huh.
confession. I don't do that,
Yeah.
all the time. And but I'm trying to be more mindful about that. So the idea is to wind down.
Mm,
When we're looking at screens or looking at the news, I rarely watch the news because it's so disturbing for my physiology.
yes.
It's just
Yes.
not good before, especially before bed.
Especially, yeah.
So there are a few. You'd asked for one, but if I, with your permission, give you a few key
Of
steps,
course, of course.
a few key tips. So the first thing that I would say is turn off your, or kind of take off, move the phone either out of your room or very far away from your bed. Don't
Mm-hmm.
keep it next to your bed. Plus, there's radiation, cell phone radiation. So
Mm-hmm.
I keep it away from my bed. I keep it in my room because I'm on call and I have to hear the
Yes.
phone, but I
Uh-huh.
keep it far away. Uh, and then ideally, you should do some kind of wind down. They talk about maybe reading a book, and they say you shouldn't read a book in bed. I know I'm not so. That's they said that because you want to leave the bed for sleep and sex. People say,
I
right?
see. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But because you want to use the bed for the things that are what's done in the bed. But of course, not everything is done in the bed. But
Yes.
but the idea is to kind of do that. I'm not sure I totally agree with the book about reading, about not reading in bed, but because I will do that. Uh, but if you want to be a purist about it, maybe
Uh-huh.
do that on a couch or somewhere else,
Yes.
and maybe read something that's not disturbing, that's calming.
Yes.
Maybe some positive affirmations, or
Mm, mm-hmm.
or a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
book that's just not too stimulating before you go to bed. And then ideally, you want to have a daily bedtime and wake up at the same time.
Uh-huh.
I, and so, and you don't want to go to bed really after 12, after midnight, because what happens is your body becomes more alert. Your cortisol will then start to increase.
I
Also, not good for
see.
your weight
Uh-huh.
because when
Uh-huh.
cortisol increases,
Mm.
it breaks down blood sugar, and it breaks down the stored sugar, and your cortisol brings the blood sugar can goes up, and so your body becomes more alert. There are people who eat, in the middle of the night. If
Yes.
you're a shift worker, that's understandable. But so you want to try and go to bed before midnight. And I would say, in terms of Ayurveda, which is from India,
Yes.
they have
Uh-huh.
it's a very fascinating medical system. To go to bed ideally between 9:30 and 10:30 at night, and then wake up with the sun. If they're,
Uh-huh.
ideally without an alarm. I still haven't mastered that either.
Mm, mm.
But I also, uh, in terms of jolting things, I changed the ringer on my phone, actually, when I get a phone call. So I'll have like a
Uh-huh.
beautiful song. This is not with sleep, but a
Yes.
beautiful song.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's not so jolting.
Those kind of details, yes, are
Yeah,
very
yeah.
important
So
and
going to
make a
bed at the same
difference.
time and waking up at the same time is a good thing. I wouldn't eat late, ideally. I wouldn't have a heavy meal before you go to bed. Another reason for that, they say that it's important to not eat 3 hours before you go to bed for a number of reasons. One, that your brain is processing, you want to clear out your brain, let the toxins
Yeah.
for the day. And there's a system called the glymphatic system, GLYMPHATIC, which is helping to detoxify toxins. And and also, if you eat before you go to bed at 3 hours, if you
Mm-hmm.
you can get reflux, gastroesophageal reflux, which could also contribute to problems sleeping. It can cause yourself to choke, and have problems going to bed. You should not drink alcohol before bed. Number one, it's not good for your reflux. If you have reflux, it's also just not good for the brain. Alcohol is a real big toxin, and there have been 3 studies
Uh-huh.
since last January, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
that came out. And I have a newsletter. If anybody's interested, they can go to
Yes.
my website,
Uh-huh.
www.
Ah,
Okay, say
yes.
www.drjillbaron.com. And you could sign up for my newsletter. And I spend, it's about a monthly newsletter. And you could find past newsletters on my blog, www.drjillbaron.com/blog, and all my past newsletters. But I have one on there about alcohol. And I was startled to find out that one of the doctors in the World Health Organization said no one should be drinking, none, no alcohol. And the
Yeah.
Canadian Task Force said,
Uh-huh.
and they listed all the different cancers you can get. And they say, 0 to 1 glasses of alcohol a week, you'll probably be okay. Believe it, you'll probably be okay. I mean, which is really quite a shock
For shock.
to
Yes.
to culture, you
Yes.
know, and that they, stomach, I mean, oral and mouth, because alcohol is a toxin to the mucosa. I mean, also a toxin to the esophagus and the stomach. I mean, all these different cancers, where breast cancer has been association with
Mm,
alcohol, breast
mm.
cancer. And, I don't know if they've figured out the mechanisms, but they've seen these trends. So that was quite startling. I think it might bother people, but look, probably a little moderation is probably okay, I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
but
and I guess there is so much there too, because if we think about um different ways, no, but alcohol is a drug,
it is.
is an a socially accepted drug, and as cigarettes, and maybe less so now, but it was exactly the same. And we if we think about that also has a place in how many use it as coping mechanisms to try to feel more relaxed or to be more social in certain circumstances and so on. So it is important to understand what is our relationship with this kind of substances, and see when as well, if there is an urge to drink, or is an urge of using any other kind of drug, really is something
Right.
to understand what are the triggers, and what is that very substance is playing, what is the role that is playing in our life, no?
Right. So you can substitute meditation for alcohol,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I
What
mean, and
what can
alcohol destroys brain cells. It's interesting. I mean, I've seen a lot of bad effects in my practice from people
No
drinking.
doubt. Mm,
First
mm,
of all, it interacts with medication,
mm,
and
mm.
especially with Tylenol, acetaminophen. People, the same enzyme system. If you think about a Pac-Man, you have a Pac-Man that's the
Yeah.
enzyme system, and let's say this is my fist goes in here. Is the alcohol. It's breaking down the alcohol, metabolizing it, but it's also the same enzyme system as Tylenol. That's why there was a woman named Karen Ann Quinlan, who was in the United States, who apparently had overdosed or had taken Tylenol and alcohol, and she ended up in a coma
Mm.
because either the alcohol was being metabolized or the Tylenol couldn't be metabolized, and it basically made her a vegetable, went to the brain, and it was terrible, and it caused liver toxicity.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
lot of medication. Yeah.
and we will be sure as well to add in the description of this episode your website with the blog as well, so people can go there and find much more of this information that we are sharing today. But we are reaching the end of the episode, and so the question that comes to mind, well, you have given us lots of ideas and tips. What when you were writing your book and thinking about all of these aspects of um ways of maintaining resilience, what were you thinking could be the main message of your book?
It's a great question. I think what just came up for me is be kind to yourself.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It just came up to me, and that applies to me and everybody. And I think if we're thoughtful, I mean, the term mindful has been, is used a lot, but
Yes.
be thoughtful and mindful about our lives, our bodies, they say our bodies are temples,
Mm.
and how we relate to others. I think is a big theme. You know, if we feel
Yes.
better and take care of ourselves, we're really taking care of others, if you think about it in a way.
Yes. Yes.
You know, because then
Absolutely.
we're less reactive, we're
Mm,
more present. And I think also another thought would be to treat other people as we would like to be treated.
mhm.
And that's really, I think that's very important, that we're all, I think many of us, including myself, have had the imposter syndrome. We're not feeling good about enough of ourselves,
Yes. Yes.
and you know, and really that we're doing the best we can.
Mm, mm.
And it's really a journey, I guess, to self-love and self-acceptance, which I'm still
Yes.
working on.
Yes. Me
And
too.
yeah, and 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 that a lot of us share these same fears and
Mm.
desire for connection, desire to be loved. And that's what it really is about. I mean, love and connection and caring. And when we're in better shape, physically and mentally and emotionally, which I think that my book talks about, then we can be kinder to others as well.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. And I think that's a marvelous message as well to finish the episode with, the reminder that we are all doing the best we can in this process, in this journey of becoming a little bit more resilient, or at least maintaining the level of resilience throughout life, with all the challenges that bring us, but also to continue doing our jobs that are so important, and but also have a fulfilling life, no,
Yes.
and have that everything is possible, I think. And I hope for our listeners, that if you are finding anything that you find particularly helpful in this episode, you can also share it. I think we are closing as well with the spirit of sharing and being mindful of how our well-being impact the well-being of others. So thank you so very much, Jill, for being here today. I really appreciate it, and for this marvelous conversation. So thank you so very much.
Oh, Roxana, well, you really, thank you so much for inviting me, and your way of being is so calming and thoughtful, and you asked me, these really wonderful questions, and so I hope I can be of service. I've been of service to your listeners.
For sure. 100% you have. So thank you again for that. Thanks.